Good morning, garden people. It's been a minute since the last time I made a video, and I apologize for that. I've been a bit busy trying to manage multiple things on the farm and some personal stuff, and all's good, but just really, really busy. And making videos just hasn't been a priority as I'm running around trying to get a whole bunch of things done. It is October, early October, and things on the farm are changing with the seasons. Fall is my favorite time of year. I love it so much. Not only the cooler weather, but the foliage here in New Hampshire is just unrivaled anywhere else. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about fall that just always revitalizes me and makes me excited for the coming winter season. I know that sounds kind of weird, but anyway. So a lot has been going on in this garden. I won't be able to cover everything in this video. I'm going to keep it kind of short, but I thought I would let you in on what I've been sort of consumed with in the last few weeks in this shade garden in particular. So let me show you. In the lower shade garden, not too much has changed other than, as you can see, the maple is starting to lose its leaves and cover up a lot of the garden. I do rake these up, and as I cut down the foliage in the garden, I rake everything out to compost and clean this up a bit. And I've got a little work to do, a little weeding. I did add a few new hostas, this one here, and this one here, which I know is stained glass. This one actually, I'm just recalling, is Empress Wu. I had an Empress Wu up here, and as you can see, it is not there anymore. Some rodent chewed up the roots and left me with a little stump in the spring. So I went and bought a new Empress Wu and tucked her in here. Other than that, the rest of the shade garden is just a mix of the same mix of hostas and some foxgloves that sprouted and flowered this year, which is a bit odd. But there are more foxgloves in there that I will continue to dig out and transplant. If you remember, the woodchuck got my hostas earlier in the year, so they're still looking pretty sad here underneath the shade tree. I do intend actually to dig most of these out from under the shade tree, this maple, and leave it mainly unplanted, except perhaps for some ground cover. I do have some vinca in there right now, but I may transplant some of the lamium that's up here under there. But I think for the most part, I'm going to leave it somewhat open and neutral, not have a whole lot going on underneath this tree. So I want to keep this tree happy and healthy, and having too much growing right up against this trunk is not a good thing. I'm going to turn here, and you can see the gas tanks are still uncovered. I do have a plan for this that I hope to get done sometime in November. I'm a bit under the gun at the moment to get things transplanted and in the ground since it's already October and my time is dwindling to get things safely transplanted. So this project's going to have to wait until later. Yesterday, I did make one purchase at my local garden center that I'm very excited about. This is a Twist and Shout Endless Summer hydrangea, and it is going up behind the propane tanks in that upper level, that big blank spot there that I will tell you all about in just a second. But I saw this at the nursery and I thought it would be perfect there. I'm not generally a big hydrangea person, especially the pink and blue puffball hydrangeas that you commonly see in the shade. But this one's a little bit different. The flowers will change color depending on the soil pH. So I expect them to be a bit more blue, but we'll see what happens. And this is more of a lace cap hydrangea rather than a big puffball hydrangea. So it also has this really interesting coloring on the leaves, this sort of burgundy coloring that I think will fit really nicely up there with some of the other plantings that I've put up in there. So now I'm up here at the top level of the shade garden. The sugar maple is right here in front of me, and so we're looking backwards toward the house and the pasture, and the little tanks are right there. This section of the garden is what I've been working on for the last month in between everything else, and it's taken me way longer than I had anticipated, mainly because this bed, and frankly my entire perennial garden, which extends way back behind the house, has been overrun with what I believe is Johnson grass, also known as quickgrass or quackgrass. I think it's Johnson grass, but anyway, it's from the pasture. It is this long-rooted perennial grass that sends out these long roots that tunnel underneath the soil deeply and sprout up everywhere, and you have to get the entire root out or it'll come back. And in addition to that, I've also found bindweed in here. And so basically I've had to sift through literally every square inch of this garden as I dig up perennials, dig up the plants, sift through it all and pull out every single little piece of bindweed root and this Johnson grass root. And it has been laborious, to say the least. It's just taken way longer. But if I don't do that, it will just continue to spread and continue to invade the garden. And it needs to be done. And once it's clear, I can then keep it under control. The thing about bindweed and Johnson grass is once it gets into your garden, if you don't immediately attack it, it will spread everywhere, and it's fairly stealthy. It tunnels underneath the soil. You don't see it until it pops up. So that's where I've spent the majority of my time, is digging up every single perennial in this garden and sifting through the soil for all the root segments. So what I've done here, and I will take you through this in a second, is I've pulled out stuff that I didn't really want. I just had, it was here, it was given to me, it didn't really fit kind of the design I'm going for, and I've given a lot away. And then I've taken perennials that I do want to keep and divided them and put them in sort of a more planned arrangement. And I've bought a few things in as well and planted those. So let me take you through what I've done so far. Just for reference, I'm going to start here at the maple tree. I haven't done a lot underneath the maple tree. I've removed some of the hostas and gotten rid of those. And then this little granite bench here, still have my deer fencing up. This little granite bench here, I've got a clear spot in front of it that I'm going to do something with as sort of a place to sit and put your feet. But generally this part hasn't changed too much. I did toss in a couple of smaller hostas up by the wall, but I still have a lot of work to do here. But moving in this direction, I replanted a few of the chewed on hostas right here behind the seating bench, and moved some of the foxgloves that were down in the lower part in here, and one is already blooming, which is just really weird to me. They're supposed to be biennial, but anyway, hopefully these bigger ones will bloom next year. And then I don't know that you can see, but underneath the leaves have started to cover everything up. I've dug out and divided lady's mantle. So I've got a big swath here of lady's mantle that will grow quickly and fill in, and I just love lady's mantle. It's the chartreuse flowers just add a real punch in shade. Next to the patch of lady's mantle, I have 3 Simsifuga. I will put the name under this part of the video, but Black Hillside Beauty. I've got 3 of those right here, and behind it is the Sun King, Japanese Sun King Aurelia. Again, I'll put the name below. And I bought 2 more of these. One is here and one is down in the main, the front part of the shade garden. Behind that, there are a couple of hostas that were here, and I haven't done anything, really to change that. I did moved actually, some hostas, and it's hard to see, but I moved some hostas along this front wall here, some smaller hostas, and again, some of them were chewed on by the woodchuck, but right along the wall there'll be a variety of hostas, different leaf textures, but on the smaller side. That'll come up next year and look really pretty and help hold the soil up against this wall. Behind it, I stuffed a few more of the foxgloves for next year and relocated some of the astilbes that I had on the upper part of this garden, where I'll show you I put some sedges. So hopefully this section will fill in really nicely with a combination of astilbes, foxgloves, and hostas in the spring, and we can keep Mr. Woodchuck out of this patch. So back up here by the Black Hillside Beauties, along the back edge of the shade garden. And again, for reference, I'm going to swing around here and you'll see the black plastic that's next to the barn. And this whole section here is going to end up being new garden next year. And this lawn will disappear. And we will have a pathway that will go approximately along the edge of this black plastic here, and down in this direction along the edge of this garden. There'll be a pathway that can get you over to that end of the garden. But that's that's for next spring. So back in here, the Black Hillside Beauty, still have some more ladies' mantle in here. And then another patch of astilbes that were here that I just cleaned up and didn't move. This here is a big patch of Solomon seal that I moved from the lower garden by the patio. A note about Solomon seal, in particular this plain leafed variety, which I don't know the technical, if it's got a hybrid name or not. It was here on the property. Don't put this where you don't want it. It does spread fairly vigorously, and the root systems are thick like tubers, and it is a bit of a challenge to dig out. I love it, and bumblebees love it, but it can be a bit of a thug. So I've had to dig out some of it already, but I love it. You just have to do a little work to keep it under control. I added some carex, some sedge here. It's variegated, and again, I will try to find the tag and the name of this. But I think this would make a nice border along the edge of what will be the pathway here. And then coming up here, I added some anemones. And again, I cannot remember the name of the variety offhand, but I will put this down below. These are brand new. I just bought them from a little nursery in town, along with, I'm going to pan over here, these anemones, which will be in part sun. Aren't they adorable? And again, I'll put the name down below. As we back up here, you'll see this sad little rhododendron. This is a little rhodie called Dark Night, and it has deep, deep maroon, gorgeous maroon flowers with white anthers on it, that are white or very light yellow anthers that just pop out against the dark magenta. Unfortunately, I think it's in the wrong spot, so this may move next year when I expand the garden next to the barn, but we'll see. I'm just trying to keep it alive at this point. If I swing back this way, you'll see there's a lot of bare soil here, and this is where I've been working, and I've basically gotten up to here. And I've been working on the other side too, trying to get through this whole patch, but I still have all of this to get through sifting, digging things out, moving them, relocating them, and trying to get all that Johnson grass and bindweed out of the garden. One thing I was struggling with as I worked on this project was there were some perennials that I wanted to keep, as well as perennials that needed to go. And as I was digging things out, I didn't have anywhere to put them, or so I thought. And so I was struggling. I was working on the other side of this patch here, digging stuff out, and then taking some stuff here and moving it there, and doing it back and forth in different stages, and taking stuff to the curb to give away. And I was kind of driving myself crazy. And then I realized, let me swirl around here. See that little patch back there? That's my vegetable garden. And see that big black tarp? Those are rows that are unused. So, anyway, so now I'm able to dig out the perennials that I want to keep, and I will just relocate them to the vegetable garden in an empty bed that isn't going to be used this year and probably next year. And that way I can move a lot faster. I can get stuff out of the garden in there to hold until I'm ready to replant it. And anything that I don't want, I'll just put on the curb, and people are more than happy to take it from me. So it's one of those things where had I thought of this a month ago, I might be a lot further on, and instead of driving myself crazy. But here we are, live and learn. All right, so we're back in the section that I haven't finished yet. Just want to show you a couple of things that have presented challenges. As you can see, this section is pretty overgrown. This garden came out of an area, this whole garden actually, was completely almost forested. There were about 30 trees in this area. And one of the first things my husband and I did when we bought the house was to cut them all down. Now, I love trees, but you can see the proximity to the house. And these trees were literally towering over the house, kind of leaning over the house, shading the house. And this poor house, this section here, is over 220 years old. And moisture is the enemy. And it was just holding a whole lot of moisture up against the house. So we cut them all down. We did not stump, however. We couldn't afford to at the time. And so there are a couple of stumps in this garden that are starting to rot away, thankfully. So I have a stump here I have to dig out, which looks like it's ready to come out. Unfortunately, it has this, yet another invasive weed all around it. I'm not quite sure what this is. It almost looks like bishop's weed, which I really hope it's not. But anyway, it's pretty extensive. So I have to sift through all of this and pull all of this out. There are actually 2 more stumps here, which this one may be able to come out. And then there's part of one here that isn't quite ready to come out yet, but we can work around that. If I back up, you'll see that this section is also bare in here, but I've started to replant some things. I've got some Nepeta along what was and will be, but is covered right now, the path that leads to the little staircase down below. So I'm going to have a little hedge of Nepeta. And then I've replanted some of the daylilies along the wall because that also has a good root system that will hold soil. And then still back to this section here that I have to dig out and relocate many of these perennials. It's a huge clump of Siberian iris. I did 2 tractor bucket loads of Siberian iris that I dug out of here. Just an obscene amount of Siberian iris, and dug that all out and put it on the curb, and it's all gone to my neighbors. This is the last remaining clump in this garden, and I haven't decided yet if I'm going to put it back in the garden, but it's a thug. So standing at the bottom by the wall, looking back up, you see this little Nepeta hedge that will eventually grow in. You'll see the front edge, or I should say the top edge of this little section of the garden. And the pathway that I'm going to put in will be right about here along this edge of the black plastic and go that way toward the hillside and then down the hill. Along this front edge, I'm going to put a low box hedge. I've bought some box plants and they will go in along here and just do a little division between this garden and then the garden that will eventually be up over here. And I think it'll be a nice delineation of the path that will be in here. It will, I think it'll be nice. And then I'll come up with something for the other side of the pathway in this garden here, so that the pathway will be sort of framed by plantings. Susie's joined me in the garden this morning. Hi, Suze. So the other thing I've been thinking about is I've been working in this garden for the last month or so, is the overall plan for this back area. And, you know, before, like I had mentioned in a previous video, I didn't really have a plan. It was just a collection of plants that people had given me and things that were here that I wanted to save, a few things that I liked, but really it was just stuffing things in and trying to cover soil. And it ended up being kind of a mishmash of a lot of stuff, but no real sort of cohesive plan. So I've been thinking a lot about an overall plan for the garden, and I will detail that in another video, but I've started at least to define the different areas so that I can reference them in future videos, but also kind of give them a cohesive thought process as I'm working on these gardens. And so the front part of this garden underneath the maple tree will be called the shade garden. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's really the only shade garden I have on this property. And so that makes sense. So all those plantings obviously will be geared toward shade plants. This garden right here that I was just showing you up above the wall, and this little planting in front, is going to be called the kitchen view garden. And that's because, let me flip this over here. That's because this is our kitchen. These windows here are our kitchen, and they look out over this garden. And really, it's the first thing we see every morning when we come out of our bedroom and we stumble into the kitchen and have, you know, make our tea and our coffee. We have this view from the windows of the kitchen. And so I want to build this into something that is really attractive from this view, that we can look out from the kitchen and admire every day. And so I'm going to call this section here the kitchen view garden. And it will transition from the shade garden over here into a part sun to full sun garden here. So it would be a little bit tricky to plant because we have to do some part shade plantings and some full sun plantings and transition it into the shade plantings and make it all look sort of cohesive. But it'll be a nice challenge. And then this lower section here, which is just dominated by the Solomon seal ferns that were here, and then my second cutting of the Annabelle hydrangea from my friend Wendy. And I think there are a few hostas in here. Anyway, it's just too overgrown. The Solomon seal and the ferns have just taken over. So next year will be a big clean out of this, keeping the Annabelle, of course, but putting some other more well-behaved perennials in here that are pretty from the kitchen, so that we can, you know, admire them from the kitchen. Also, when we get a table and chairs out here on the patio, it'll be something nice to look at and kind of feel part of. And then the rest of the garden, in the sunny section of the yard behind the house here, this whole strip, is going to be named the Pollinator Paradise. And all of the pollinator-friendly plants that I've been accumulating in various parts of the garden will go here. And this will be just a riot of color and pollinating, pollinator-friendly plants that will keep the hummingbirds and the bees, and native bees in particular. I'll be sure to plant lots of species that native bees like. That's where all of these will go. And again, this section is for next year, because it's going to be like the shade garden, where I'm going to have to dig through pretty much every single inch of the garden and dig out the creeping Johnson grass. And then there are a couple of other invasive, creepy things that have gotten in there. I don't know their names yet, but I will find out. But it's going to involve the same amount of labor, and that won't happen this year. It'll be a next year project for sure. So that's it from the garden today. I will have more videos about the fall foliage on the farm, which is just fantastic this time of year, and some updates on the vegetable garden as well. And again, my apologies for the lack of videos. I'm rethinking this whole thing and my farm and what I do here, and it's taken a bit of time away from doing things like videos. But I promise you there will be more to come, and I can't wait to show you all the things that are happening. So until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.